Dr. Anjali Venkateshwaran, and will be introducing today's speaker on behalf of Biomere, a preclinical CRO with locations in Boston, San Francisco, and China. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Daniel Kraft. Dr. Kraft is a Stanford and Harvard-trained physician scientist, inventor, entrepreneur, and innovator. With over 25 years of experience in clinical practice, biomedical research, and healthcare innovation, Daniel has chaired the Medicine for Singularity University since its inception and is the founder and chair of Exponential Medicine, a program that explores convergent, rapidly developing technologies and their potential use in biomedicine and healthcare. Following undergraduate degrees from Brown University and medical school at Stanford, Daniel was board certified in both internal medicine and pediatrics and has completed a residency at the Mass General Hospital and Boston's Children's Hospital. Daniel's talk is titled The Future of Health, Biomedicine and Life Sciences. Where can technology take us? Where he explores various topics, including the power of exponential thinking, the emergence of devices and apps in the healthcare space, and novel approaches such as AI to accelerate drug development. So without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Daniel Kraft.
Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Kraft. Great to be with you. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so taking a look at the future of health, biomedicine, life sciences through the perspective of the convergence of technologies and where they're taking the whole biomedical enterprise. I'm trained as a physician, scientist. I've spent plenty of time in the clinic, in the lab, from bench to bedside. I also chair a program called Exponential Medicine, and I'm going to try and share some of the perspectives along the lines of what's here, what's coming, and hopefully inform your mindset to the possibilities of today and the near future. So starting out, the future of health and biomedicine. Where can technology take us? Thanks for Biomere for hosting me here. I know many of you come from many different perspectives, and I'm going to try and blend the sort of clinical side with sort of the life sciences and lab side to hopefully change a bit of your perspective and thinking. So we are really we're in this, age of advancing technologies. Many of them are advancing to the point where they almost feel like magic. They certainly transformed our world in many ways. Many fields have been quote unquote disrupted, how we get our movies, remember Blockbuster? Not anymore. How we get our music, our movies, do our banking, have all sort of shifted seemingly rapidly in the last decade or so. And certainly we're now, as I record this, still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and that is certainly accelerating some of these disruptions in good and bad ways for life sciences and healthcare. And I love this cartoon, who led the digital transformation of your company, the CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? And sadly, COVID-19 is forcing transformation, but as I'll try and make the point, it's catalyzing a lot of good, particularly in the collaborations in science, from the research side to the clinical side, that will hopefully have positive ramifications downstream. So when you think about health and biomedicine, you maybe your own experience as a patient or a clinician or as working in clinical trials, we want to think medicine is in the fourth industrial age, but biomedicine really sometimes feels stuck between the third, maybe sometimes even back to the second. And, we talk about bench to bedside, but that feedback loop is still often quite slow and can take, years to decades. And we have an opportunity to really shift things across biomedicine, sometimes to innovate, doing things a bit better, and sometimes really to totally disrupt, making things that make old things obsolete. So there's a spectrum here, and it's not always about disruption. There's certainly plenty of room to improve through innovation as well. And when we think about innovation, we've got to go, where are we today? I mean, let's just take the standard hospital. What's the future of the hospital? Well, we're moving from hospital to home or hospital to homespital. Now in the era of, connected devices, Internet of Things, we'll talk more about. That's really changing the game of how we're doing virtualized care and maybe even now increasingly virtualized research. The biomedical research endeavor, mortar and pestle research laboratories, is also going not from hospital to home, but from lab to laptop. A college undergraduate with a powerful computer connected to the NIH databases could do drug repurposing and outsource preclinical trials. Lots of power in our now computed digital age. And sometimes, it takes a little bit of perspective. I trained in internal medicine and pediatrics at Mass General Hospital. I went back there a few years ago for a reunion with the guys and girls I trained with in the trenches. And, when I went back to visit the ward where I spent my first month as a terrified young doctor 20 years ago, almost nothing had changed. Same alarms were beeping, some of the same nurses, maybe the same patients. The only difference was the young doctor on call was pushing around a laptop, typing the medical record. We used to handwrite it. And the front desk, to this day, is still using our cutting edge medical communication technology, the fax machine. And we're still using, number 2 pencils and filling out the same forms. I went for an exam the other day trying to find it, and I got my results back on a CD-ROM. I don't even own a CD-ROM player anymore. So we're still in 2020 using fax machines, using pill cutters, still waiting in waiting rooms, an average of 67 minutes for a 12-minute visit, whether you're in San Francisco or Calcutta. And we have silos, academic silos, clinical silos, research silos. We're defining often our clinical and research endeavors by body part. We're now in this connected genomic, proteomic age. We have an opportunity to redefine health, biomedicine, life sciences out of its old buckets. I spent lots of time at Lab Bunch. My bench was pretty messy. We can also rethink, that whole endeavor and the sort of buckets in the sort of research endeavor and bring them together to integrate them, which I think is where the opportunities really lie to accelerate things. Let's take a step back and look at where we are with sort of the big picture healthcare system. It's really not healthcare, it's actually sick care. And what do I mean by sick care? Sick care is based on our model of very intermittent and episodic data. You might go in for your annual checkup, EKG, labs, and hopefully you're only in a clinical setting 0.0001% of the time. And that means our data, doesn't really get to our clinicians or our researchers or folks running clinical trials very easily. It might be written on notebooks and sent by fax or PDF. So that intermittent episodic data leads to our reactive sick care model, where we wait for the patient to show up in the emergency room with a heart attack or a stroke or a late stage cancer in my field of oncology, or we wait for the pandemic to arrive. And our opportunity here, both preclinically and I think clinically, is to start using data in new, more continuous ways, more proactive, more personalized, and to enable us to do care anytime, anywhere, arguably at lower cost in a much more democratized way. And on the biomedical research side, enable virtual labs and not needing to be in $1 million laboratory to do some of these key research elements going forward. We also, in our sick care world, don't really have a world of precision medicine. We talk about precision medicine. It's really a more imprecision. For the top 10 grossing drugs sold in the United States the last couple of years, they're only effective in about 1 in 4 to 1 in 24 of the patients who take them. These are the blockbuster drugs. And we have a long way to go to really truly make drugs work with less toxicity and more effectivity. So there's really obviously this paradigm shift in treatment from the usual blockbuster one-size-fits-all to much more stratified, hopefully precise, less toxic and impactful therapeutics. So we really have the chance to move the needle, to be more personalized, proactive, preventative, and predictive, and really even not just thinking about the sick care side, think about optimizing wellness, precision wellness, optimizing our health span. We all want to live long lives, but many of us don't want to be 120 and feel 120. So we want to add life to our years, quality of life. And there's a whole interest now in how do we really achieve that longevity, escape velocity, and even pharmaceutical and other approaches to potentially stopping and even reversing aging going downstream. So in the rest of this talk, I'm going to try and cover things in a few different realms. A bit of where we are with new forms of data, health and prevention, and tying that to sort of the biomedical research enterprise. Where are we with sort of diagnostics, therapeutics, discovery, all being driven by this convergence of technology and new possibilities. So what is the future of health and biomedicine? Look up last year's National Geographic. I wrote the opening article. and they kind of retitled it 12 Innovations That Will Revolutionize the Future of Medicine. That wasn't really my headline of choice. It's really not about any one innovation. It's how we connect the dots and synthesize those innovations to really move the needle. And a lot of those technology platforms that are coming together are accelerating at an exponential rate. So I want you all to become exponential thinkers. What does that mean? Well, many technologies are moving and improving and doubling in their capacity or speed or price performance every couple of years, or sometimes less than that. The classic example is Moore's Law, the power of computing, which is getting often twice as good and half the price every 18 to 24 months. That's why our supercomputers in our pockets, our smartphones, have incredible power. In fact, I'm holding an antique. This is an iPhone 2. It's 10 years old. 10 years ago was amazing. Now when I charge it up, and it still works, it feels slow and clunky. My iPhone 11, 10 years from now, will also feel slow and antique, maybe embedded in my contact lens or my iPhone, my Apple virtual reality, augmented reality headset. So it's hard, though, to think exponentially. Our brains are wired pretty linearly. You can think 30 paces, I'll be across the room. But if you take 30 exponential steps, doubling 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, by the 15th step, 32,000 meters. But by the 30th step, boy, you're at a billion meters. That would be 26 times around the Earth with that 30th step. And the 31st would be, 52, 54 times around the planet. So I want you to think about what the powers of a lot of these technologies, because it's often deceptive where we are now and will it be in 1, 2, 5, let alone a decade. And you've seen these changes. What maybe some of us grew up on, this sort of technology, is all dissolved and become appified. That also applies to some of the application of the biomedical and research and CRO world. And it gives immense power. Someone with a cell phone in rural Rwanda has access to the same information that only the president of the United States had, 20, 30 years ago. So we have an opportunity to reimagine health, biomedicine, research with this exponential thinking. It also enables us as consumers to have more transparency, to use our smart devices to compare physicians or drug prices, like things like GoodRx, or look at individual surgeons and their complication rates, so you can find the bad apples and go to the best potential surgeon. And we're, of course, now doing a lot of our health and medicine and research on our smart supercomputers, which are becoming medicalized. You can do a lot more than talk or take pictures. The sensors on our smartphone can be used in all sorts of ways, including in the biomedical research realm as a sort of our digital biomarker, measuring our digital exhaust. And from doing simple things now, like looking at an ear infection potentially in your kid with a modification of the microphone and speaker and a piece of paper and an app, you can determine potential ear infections, as a small example. And Apple and Samsung and others are building in potential glucometers and real-time blood pressure monitoring. For those in the research realm in the lab, your smartphone can be integrated into your microscope, for example. All sorts of examples you've already probably been seeing and playing with, all the way to plugging in a portable ultrasound for your mice or for your own heart. So what used to fit on a desktop now fits on our Apple Watches, which are becoming FDA-cleared medical devices. Computers are the power of the Apple Watch fits on a computer the size of a grain of rice. You've heard of the Internet of Things. Now we're entering the Internet of Medical Things, or the Internet of Biomedical Research potentially as well, where it's writing 5G, 100 times the speed of 4G, and really gives us the opportunity to sort of connect the dots amongst billions of objects and understand things in new ways across the biomedical enterprise. The challenge is a lot of these new technologies, whether it's a chip in a patient or in a lab animal or in a flask that's beeping at you, is that it creates massive amounts of data. And often that data is siloed. It's not interoperable. It's hard to access, sometimes based on old and out-of-date HIPAA laws, other times misaligned incentives where pharma companies or clinical payers don't want to share information. And I think we have an opportunity now to take this massive amount of data and narrow the gap between turning that from data into actionable information, whether it's about drug discovery or a clinical trial or how to best treat a specific patient with a specific genome, and narrow that gap from data to information to actual knowledge that we can use at the bedside and then can circle back in a feedback loop to the bench. So let's all work on narrowing that gap. So technology is only a part of the equation to advancement. You have to align the incentives, and the incentives in at least our US healthcare system, is often misaligned. It's on the right side of the equation. We don't practice evidence-based medicine, we practice reimbursement-based medicine. And we have a real opportunity now to start shifting that to the left, to be rewarding proaction and prevention. It's often now called value-based care, where the drugs and other therapeutics you might be developing are only going to get paid for when they work, right? So that's really shifting the game across the spectrum. Some of those incentives are to shift where healthcare happens, from the hospital to the home, to our phone, to our inside our bodies, to the corner pharmacy, minute clinics and CVS's and Walmarts and Walgreens, all rolling out new integrated platforms. Some of them are virtual, blended with physical. So the ability to maybe run a clinical trial and have it accessed and done at Walmart or CVS might be part of the future, as these become more integrated with technologies for doing labs and physicians and veterinarians even on site. So a part of this fast moving future is we're now in this age of connected health, mobile health, digital health. Those are all kind of buzzwords. We'll just soon call it health. But it just gives us the opportunity to connect the dots between information, medical data, the cloud, and to take those data sources and to personalize those to the individual with new apps and services, or to the biomedical research team or clinical team. It's still relatively early, even though we have thousands and thousands of apps, to really make the promise of digital health and medicine actualized. But it's not just about the digital layer, it's how that connects with big data and AI and virtual reality and robotics and synthetic biology and virtual reality, all those fields converging faster, cheaper, better, smaller, to the point where they're getting less expensive, easier to use, and much more powerful on that exponential we talked about. And in effect, creating entire new fields. Many of you are working in these fields: computational biology, AI meets drug discovery, companion diagnostics, designer antibodies, digiceuticals, continuous monitoring. Those fields in many realms didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago. And it gives us also the lens now from the biomedical research side to be combining the science and new tools like CRISPR with the technology, wearables, low-cost omics, and the immense amount of data, and at the interface to really be able to accelerate new discoveries and hopefully speed those new findings to the patients who need them, and address, grand challenges across the spectrum, from rising costs and aging demographic, challenges with access to care, challenges with a massive amount of data and friction in the system, still faxing requests and repeating tests, and also addressing the challenges of regulatory. How do we get the FDA to think exponentially? How do we help the payers who pay for the new drugs and devices and apps reward new innovations? So lots of challenges. So we can take some inspiration. There's reimagination and disruption all around us. Uber is an exponential company. They didn't invent the smartphone, GPS, online payments, but they connect the dots. They're only a 10 or 11-year-old company, and they've disrupted the taxi driver, for example. And now that world's going to get disrupted, the Uber driver, by self-driving cars, which are coming on fast and furious. What's the future of work in that regard? We're seeing the Uberization of healthcare. Uber and Lyft are now, in some cases, you press a button in the app and a nurse can come to deliver a flu shot. There's Uberization of doctor and nurse calls or drug delivery. All these things synthesizing challenge high friction elements with press of a button. And the big players are getting in the mix. Amazon buying companies like PillPack, opening up pharmacies, maybe delivering your drugs by drone in the not so distant future. So watch that space. It's actually already here. Health and prevention, both for yourself, your friends, your family, your patients, and how that the data flows here can inform biomedical research from the preclinical and animal side as well. First of all, let's think of our outcomes. Our bad outcomes are often not driven by our genetics, but our behaviors, particularly our behaviors over long periods of time: not enough sleep, too much stress, alcohol, etc. Now we're in the era where we can start to measure our behaviors. Fitbit, the original Fitbit, is only 11 years old, launched in 2009. Now we have wearables that can pick up almost every element of our physiology and behavior. I'm wearing a Fitbit and a Whoop and an Apple Watch and a patch in my underwear. These are pretty amazing exponential technologies that can, fit on a ring or into your contact lens. And the power there is really interesting because it's going beyond just a simple accelerometer all the way down to the point where we can put an RFID digestible into a pill to track adherence, for example. or a digital tattoo that can go on an animal model or a patient and track a whole set of vital signs, or maybe a wearable that's going to pick up cancer. But it doesn't need to be fancy. It can be simple, small data. Just wearing a Fitbit on a patient who just had a hip surgery and has gone home. Are they walking more and doing well, or are they walking less? Or someone who might have coronavirus or cancer. We can look at their data and see, the cancer patients who are likely to do well and not do well simply based on their activity measured by a simple wearable on their wrist. So where does this take us? It's this, many of us are data geeks, quantified self. You measure your steps, your sleep, your diet, but often that's data is just stuck on your phone and isn't shared more globally. I think where we're going to move is from quantified self to quantified health, where that's going to start to connect and flow to your clinician, to your clinical trialist, to your big pharma company for post-market research, et cetera, and hopefully smart, anonymized, privacy-centric ways. But that gives us the opportunity to use that real-time flow of data to measure and optimize health and wellness, to do early diagnostics, and then to, when we're treating a disease, have a much smarter, proactive feedback loop. And there's lots of things we can digitize. Obviously, you can digitize your weight. You can now digitize your shape. This is called shape scale. Does your weight and picks up your muscle mass and your fat mass. And that might be useful for dosing drugs and beyond, or picking up medical problems. We can measure common things like hypertension. High blood pressure is the #1 cause of early death and morbidity around the world. And now we can measure that sometimes seamlessly. Radar-based cuffless blood pressure is coming. That will be a game changer for measuring, and some just got FDA cleared. That's going to be interesting. We're measuring real-time blood sugar through your patch or wrist. And it goes beyond wearables, on our feet, or beyond to the idea of even insidables, into our contact lenses, into skin subcutaneous devices that are on the market today that can measure blood oxygenation, potassium, blood sugar, and transmit that data 24/7 anywhere in the world. Starts with DARPA in the military, but it's going to come to chronic disease patients, for example, where they can be monitored and tracked in hopefully helpful ways. There's trainables, there's ringables. You can put all sorts of sensors into a ring today. It can track your sleep, your heart rate variability. It's being used to pick up and predict COVID. It's very good at sleep. Sleep is something we're not getting much of in many cases. And if you do nothing else from this talk, just pick some device or app that measures your sleep and see if you can start to optimize that and get some insights to improve it. It has big health implications for prevention and health downstream. You can quantify your breath. Devices like breathometer can be used to track the quality of your breath, not just blood alcohol, or soon are able to pick up evidence of early cancers like lung cancer or metabolic disease. There are sweatables for athletes, ingestibles like are Fitbits for the stomach, sockables to track the health of a diabetic patient's feet to avoid them missing a hot spot or an ulcer. Underwearables is my favorite. I won't show you mine, but these are getting so cheap that you can put a sensor into your 10 pairs of your underwear, and these measure your respiratory status and your steps and your heart rate. And as the incentives have changed, there are new reimbursement codes for what's called remote patient monitoring. We're now able to use these and get paid for sensing a patient. And they might have COPD or pneumonia or COVID, and see are they getting in trouble, and proactively bring them in for care or adjust their medications before they get into big trouble. And then many of you are on the preclinical side. You can now do quantification of your mice. I spend so much time counting dead mice and tumors in cages now. That's becoming digitized and quantified mice in a sense. And many new forms of mice, humanized mice, so you can blend in. I made many skid-hue mice and non-skid mice, a lot of ways to integrate human immune systems and tissue into these models, and now measure them without having to count them visually every day. For some using other with pets or animal models that are beagles or large animals, there are similar devices that are Fitbits for dogs. Pet Bark, I think, is one, or V-Trax, it can give you scratching scores and beyond, or new imaging modalities for dogs and cats and other lab-based animals. So tremendous opportunity to quantify not just humans, but our animal subjects, whether they're our pets or our research subjects. We often don't want to have to wear a device. Now this is the idea of invisibles. Our AI machine learning combined with a consumer camera now can pick up the vital signs in a kid sleeping in a crib or your pet sleeping or animals in a lab. Cameras now, low-cost cameras with AI and machine learning can tell who the individual is. Are they upright? Are they drinking? Are they dressed? What are their behaviors? If they had a fall? Voice can be a biomarker to pick up everything from depression to Parkinson's disease, or even has been shown just voice alone can pick up signs of heart disease. So vocal biomarkers, and which are now being studied in the setting of COVID with changes in voice sounds and cough to see if we can just use the microphones on our smartphones to pick up diagnostic COVID or other diseases. Wi-Fi has been modified to pick up the vital signs of up to 10 or more people in a room. So now we can start to seamlessly measure all sorts of potential behaviors. Again, quite useful in clinical trials, but also measuring a patient with dementia or folks aging in place. So again, lots of new ways to measure and collect data beyond something that's just stuck on your wrist. So what are the implications, right? It means we're soon to be always online with our digital exhaust, our digitome. What do we do with all this big data, right? Is it going to empower you, your doctor, your pharmacist? How does it not overwhelm the poor clinician who's overwhelmed already feeding data into horrible electronic medical record systems? So we need the workflow to work and to think about the quadruple aim, improving the clinician experience or the pharmacist experience or the clinical trials experience, so that we're not just having more apps and gizmos, but it becomes synthesized with smart design thinking. And starting to come together. If you have Apple Health Kit, you can now integrate a lot of wearable and other data, glucometer data, blood pressure data into your smartphone, and often send that and share that to your electronic medical record at your hospital or your clinic or through your trial. The trick is, what does this new digital data mean? Well, Verily, Google Health spinout, is now doing what's called the baseline trial to look at what is the digital exhaust from 10,000 plus volunteers, both in health and in disease, from wearables, their genomes, their medical records. There's the All of Us trial from the NIH, which is kind of like a Framingham trial on steroids, starting to look at the ability to crowdsource again over 1 million Americans. I'm one of the volunteers for this, to help really give us a much better holistic view of health across different socioeconomic and race groups, unlike Framingham, which is pretty white bread heterogeneous in Massachusetts. So once we have some of this data, we can do a much better job of predictalytics, predicting someone's path in health and disease, like a FICO score for your health, for example, or give you early warning. Just like your check engine light in your car is a synthesis from 400 sensors in many cars, we can have a check engine light for the body, or maybe even a check engine light for a clinical trial, synthesizing lots of data and giving you early warning, a bit of an OnStar type system for individuals and maybe populations. And this is not science fiction. A colleague of mine at Stanford, he's king of quantified self. He diagnosed his own type 2 diabetes probably well before it would have happened otherwise by looking at this synthesis of data. Also picked up his own Lyme disease. So tracking physiomes is going to become part of our future. It starts with the data geeks like him, soon will become easy and integrated for all of us. And in fact, Stanford has now spun this out to think about new forms of collecting this information and new forms of physical exams, which integrate our digital exhaust, MRIs, genome, microbiome, and beyond, and enables a synthesized dashboard to make sense of that. And again, that could be for a human or a clinical trial subject, in human, an animal model, and beyond, to synthesize that information. And we're seeing other interesting examples. Can your Fitbit spot the flu? Here's my own Fitbit data. When I got a cold back in December, my resting heart rate went up. And now we're seeing many folks look at that to see whether your wearables could pick up COVID. Or now you can crowdsource data and share how you're doing and get a map of COVID near you, as an example. And as we try and open up society and synthesize all this data in our social graphs, it may not be science fiction that you'll get a little warning before you go to have a lunch meeting with Michael about the risk of contracting a certain disease from individuals based on this convergence of data. And hopefully, we're going to build better maps from this. Just like Teslas will build better maps for all the Teslas when they learn different curves in the road and where to slow down. They go from low to high precision maps. Hopefully we can crowdsource maps like this across hospital systems, biopharma, public health systems, so that we're all sort of building better maps together, not keeping data siloed. Okay, lots of data. What does it mean? How do we leverage it? We all know we're supposed to exercise more and eat less, but we often ignore that knowledge. We need coaching, sometimes digital coaching, a real person on the other end of the line or an avatar. And even a robot can help older folks, for example, stay on top of their complex medical regimens. Um, and so many examples of digital coaching. Google's putting a Google Coach out. These coaches can feel real. There's now this era of avatars that could help coach you through a mental health issue, or could be helping be your coach or guide for a clinical trial, and they feel real, and people respond to them as if they're real. Voice can be a platform now, of course, for interaction, and everything from controlling your house to your operating room to your robotic pipette man. So lots of platforms growing on Alexa and Google Home. And hopefully this will synthesize to give us personalized coaching. When we look in the mirror, it's going to know us, how to communicate to us based on our age and culture and language. And will maybe not just show you of today when you look in the mirror, but maybe you of tomorrow, and show you what's going to happen if you keep smoking 2 packs a day, you of tomorrow, or if you spend too much time on social media, right? Interesting implications. And that's an interesting example of blended or augmented reality, another field that's getting super interesting, right? You remember about 5-6 years ago, we had the advent of the Google Glass. I remember my old antique Google Glass. Not a big consumer hit, but actually being used quite often in the clinic for physicians to pull up data, and the things that they see are scribed by a medical scribe off-site in the Philippines, for example, to help them offload their work. And there's many new augmented reality platforms emerging. Most popular is the HoloLens out of Microsoft, which can enable the synthesis of incredible biomedical data in the clinic. We can start to overlay CT, MRI data for a neurosurgeon or orthopedic surgeon to do procedures that are going to be increasingly guided along the way. We can use it with our kids, augmented reality, to teach them about their anatomy. Here's my son learning anatomy with this augmented reality shirt and an app. Or if you're trying to communicate, you're a drug rep, or you're trying to explain a drug mechanism, you can use augmented reality on a simple tablet or your smartphone to see things in 3 dimensions and communicate better. Then, of course, there's virtual reality. It's always fun to put grandma on her first roller coaster ride in VR. Feels real. But VR is not just for games. It's becoming a therapeutic. It can be better than opiates at managing pain. Burn injury patients can go into a cold environment and throw snowballs and penguins and use less opiates. Or now we're seeing VR blend with medication for like PTSD. Even psychedelics like MDMA and psilocybin are now being used with good effect in PTSD and other issues, and that can often blend with virtual reality. It's being used in physical therapy to be engaging and getting folks to do their shoulder and other exercises, as we often don't do when we have PT examples. Or you're about to have a procedure and you're scared, or you're stuck in a hospital, you can go to the beach instead of looking at the ceiling of the operating room, and that can lower stress modalities. And then one of the big implications is for education. You might want to be educating a surgeon about how to do a procedure. You might be wanting to educate a trialist or a patient about what's happening with their heart or a medical device. Lots of new ways to understand and learn using virtual reality, including in drug development. You can now collaborate in virtual reality. If you haven't tried the Oculus Rift or Oculus now, they're getting low cost, they're getting super powerful, and now you can go in and play with the molecules and look at the drug interactions and potentially design new drugs, again, collaboratively in these incredible virtual reality spaces. So I encourage you to try one for fun and for work. You can write it off. And so I think we're going to sort of see this blend of, driver assist with, and we'll talk more later about, AI and drug development all coming together. So in a summary for this section, we're now in this era of Internet of Medical Things, quantified health, kind of on the cusp. In the next 5 years, we're going to see healthcare as a service, predictalytics, the convergence of lots of omics, which we'll touch about next. And the next decade, really having this sort of layer of personalization around each of us and our patients going forward. So let's, in the last bit, talk about diagnostics and therapy. Diagnostics are often critical to developing drugs and therapeutics. It's often important to identify diseases hopefully early rather than late, like Alzheimer's disease. Most of the drugs that have been developed don't do much, but now there's ways to pick up who's likely to get dementia 10 or even 20 years early based on eye tracking or PET scans or blood biomarkers. And hopefully we can identify folks 10 or 20 years early, and some of the drugs that are in development might be given proactively, like we give a statin for high cholesterol, maybe a statin for the brain, or other approaches to reduce neuroinflammation. And virtual reality, by the way, is another approach and being used for diagnostics. And again, drugs that might be okay at removing plaques at late stage are now being trialed earlier before there are symptoms. I've had my own brain done. Here's my MRI. It came back color-coded with AI assist. I can compare my brain to others. I've got 96 percentile hippocampi. That might be a good thing. And the hope of all this amazing imaging is it's going to enable us to pick up problems earlier. I also had a full body MRI at a company called Pernuvo. Incredible amounts of data, all done and processed and analyzed by a radiologist with the assistance of artificial intelligence, and gave me a bit of a deep dive on my medical risks that was communicated to me as a patient, and also something I could share with my caregivers. And of course, imaging is going to integrate into trials increasingly as it gets cheaper and more available. I would imagine in a decade, we'll be able to go into your corner Walmart or CVS and maybe get a 10-minute full body MRI that's analyzed by AI machine learning to do basic screening at a fraction of the cost of what we have today. In fact, there are examples of this. Is the Hyperfine device. It costs 20 times less than a normal MRI, 10 times less the weight, 35 reduced power, and is portable. And so this is just coming to market now as an example. Or many of you in the small animal world, incredible imaging modalities there. I used to do a lot of with Xenogen. You can track luminescent cells and look at cancer progression or immunotherapy. Lots of new imaging modalities and big data that are quite exciting. And then back to the sort of clinical side is that we have this new set of digital doctor tools that used to require a clinic that now can fit in your pocket or your smartphone. The idea of basically a medical device that acts as sort of a medical tricorder, integrating lots of data from one device. Like the TytoCare device out of Israel, you can now buy in a Best Buy that you can use for a virtual care visit while you're talking to your doctor on Skype or Zoom or another telehealth platform. You can be doing an exam, looking in your ears, listening to your heart, listening to your lungs. So that can augment a disease visit, or a clinical trial visit can be done virtually. So lots of new ways to look at data for diagnostics or managing chronic disease. A few other examples: the echo stethoscope. I have one here, is great at listening to heart sounds and does an EKG and has AI algorithms that can diagnose the heart murmur. And that applies also to the animal world. Merck has developed combinations where you can listen to all sorts of animals and figure out what's going on with their hearts. So intelligent stethoscopes, again, blending the veterinary world and the human world. Lots of interesting overlaps, and things can often start in animals that can't happen in humans, or a pill to visualize the equine intestines. So lots of potential there. The ultrasound, right? It's now $2,000, fits in your pocket, connects to your smartphone, has AI to help the exam. That democratizes diagnostics to pretty much anywhere in the world, and is even being used to diagnose COVID in the lungs. The Apple Watch can now diagnose atrial fibrillation, and soon potentially much more, like hyperkalemia, just from the AI analysis of your T waves. We can send patients home from the ER, or never bring them to the hospital in the first place, with patches like the Vital Connect patch, integrating tons of interesting data and enable basically to have an intensive care unit level of analysis anywhere you go. And beyond vital signs, of course, we're in the time of microfluidics, the laboratory on a chip. We can do a lot of laboratory elements pretty much on our smartphones today that go well beyond blood sugar. So this device is in the market in some places, basically a smartphone-based laboratory. Some very advanced laboratory elements looking at the immune system can now, in an emergency room or clinic with someone with fever, do they have bacteria or viral infections? You can tell from their immune profile which one they likely have, and then treat it accordingly. We're now in the era of looking at blood biopsies to pick up cancer at stage 0 or stage 1, and even sequencing, not just for tumors, but sequencing the sewage to look for signs of coronavirus, COVID, and that is picked up a week or two earlier than when you'd see clinical cases. So new forms of doing public health using sequencing as well. And speaking of COVID, we have a very big need to have smarter, cheap, available tests for active infection to see who's infectious and has the disease. There's some paper-based things in development, several other home-based tests. And because it's so critical, I've been the chair of the X Prize Pandemic Alliance Task Force. We just launched in July, this month of 2020, as I speak, an X Prize for rapid, cheap, frequent, and fast COVID testing. It's going to be it's a $5 million prize. We already have over 100 teams registered. And the idea is to accelerate some of the best solutions, get them to scale across the world more quickly to help us return to normal life. And there's some very clever versions of checking immunity as well. Some of those can be read with a QR code on your smartphone. There are other examples of your smartphone doing lab diagnostics, the rise of the medical selfie. Here's an Israeli company called Healthy.io. I'm on the board actually. And they've been very smart about being able to leverage your smartphone camera to do a home urinalysis and send that data directly to your clinician and to the pharmacist, or screen for proteinuria, or use the same technology to look for, to monitor wounds. So tremendous ability in our smartphones to do this sorts of things.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft, for a great presentation. If you would like to find out more information about Daniel Kraft, please visit danielkraftmd.net. And please make sure to watch the second half of this presentation. Thank you.